Welcome, everyone, to the Nebraska World Language Guest Speaker Series. Today, we have a special guest, Dr. Teresa Catalano from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, who's going to share with us for a good hour here on translanguaging in the world language classroom. On behalf of NDE, ESU5, and CLTA, welcome to our World Language Guest Speaker Series. Dr. Catalano, take it away.
All right. Welcome, everybody. So glad that you could be here. And even though I know you're all so busy and you could take the time to come today, so I really appreciate it. Those of you that heard the song I played, that's kind of an example of translanguaging because there's all kinds of languages used in there. Did anybody pick up on which languages were sung?
Well, I sure heard Spanish and English. I don't know if I heard
There's one
another one.
more.
One
One
more?
more. Anybody know? It's Italian.
Oh.
Zucchero, he's famous for translanguaging in his songs, and he's an Italian artist. So one of my favorite Italian singers. So I just wanted to share that with you. So I just want to say welcome. I hope you see your language on here somewhere. And if I missed it, I apologize. And if I got it wrong, hopefully you can tell me in the chat, like change this to sometimes you Google these things and then you get them wrong. But hopefully, I just wanted you all to know how welcome you are. My agenda today is I'm going to start with a joke because they tell me that that's a good way to build community when you're giving an online talk. So I'm going to try that. And then just a little bit getting to know you. We're going to introduce the concept of translanguaging, talk about why it's good for language learners, and why in order to translanguage, you have to get to know your students. And then I'm going to give some examples in world language classrooms. And then I'm going to talk about some other examples from other classrooms too, and just give you an example of how translanguaging can actually be used in arts-based teaching in world language classrooms, such as for poetry. And then we're going to do a little bit ourselves. And then hopefully if there's time at the end, I want to have some breakout rooms, or if we only have, 6 of us, we may just do it all together. Just get your ideas, because I'm hoping today, there might not be everything that I tell you that you can do in your own class, but I'm hoping it will inspire you to think about your own ideas for your own classroom, okay? So here's my joke. How do you show somebody you're thankful? How do you thank somebody when a bilingual person invites you to a meal, okay? So the way we do this is we say, mil gracias. And if anybody doesn't know Spanish, it's just a silly play on words that bilingual people would understand because mil also means 1,000 or many thanks. But bilinguals would understand this joke because we know that mil sounds like meal. So yeah, that's my silly joke. And I hope you like it. By the way, what I showed you on the screen here, if you notice, I have Spanish on the screen, but I didn't talk in Spanish most of the time. I talked in a different language, right? So everyone here, I assume, speaks English as well. So I know you could understand me. And I put the other language on the screen. That is a type of translanguaging that is called co-languaging. Okay. And it works really well in bilingual programs if you don't want to have to be wasting your time translating constantly. You can make all the parents feel welcome. So if I'm in a Chinese immersion program, for example, I could be talking in Mandarin, but have English on the screen for the parents that don't know Mandarin, or vice versa, or switch it, Mandarin on the screen for 2 slides, English on the screen the next slides, right? It's a way to make people feel welcome and to feel comfortable at least part of the time. So translanguaging is just all over the place. All right, so now The Rock wants to know, who are you? Um, so I'm going to try something here and see if this works, even though I only have a few people. So I'm just going to go to my Slido. Can you all see this? Hold on, give it a second. There's a QR code, or you can just go to slido.com and plug in that number. So I'll give you a moment. And then once you're ready, go ahead and just fill out the poll. Hopefully it will show up here. And if not, then I might have to just do the old way in the chat. Oh, there we go. Yay. So we've got a French teacher here. Yep, French, German, Chinese, wonderful. What a nice variety. Fantastic. I think that's probably everybody since we only have a few people here today. So, all right. Thank you, Emily. So good to meet you from Indiana. Wow, that's amazing. And I see lots of welcoming in the chat, so that's fantastic. I'm thrilled. So now your next question, your last one, is what is translanguaging? What do you think of when you think of translanguaging? In one word, give me a word. And this is supposedly going to create a word cloud for us. Spanglish, cool. Yes, definitely. What else? Fluidity, beautiful. Chinglish, yeah. There's almost every language has like a glish to it, you know? It's so interesting. Yeah, flip-flop, okay, moving back and forth. Yep. Anything else? Give you about 10 more seconds. Yeah, welcome, Elsa. Nobody else? All right, well then I'm gonna, oh, there we go, code switch, yes. To be able to translate, yeah. A lot of people think we're just talking about translating. So I'll talk about that in a minute. All right, we'll go ahead and go back to the presentation. So first I want to just talk about what do I mean by natural translanguaging, right? So because there's different types of translanguaging. Natural translanguaging is when bilinguals move across languages fluidly as a way of making the sense of the world. And we usually do this with people that we know speak the languages we speak, right? Because we know they'll understand us. It's also multilingual learners using their linguistic repertoires as resources for learning. And when bi or multilingual learners use the languages they know as identity markers, it's one way to point to our innovative ways of knowing, being, and communicating. Pedagogical translanguaging, on the other hand, is referring to instructional strategies. Okay, so it's actually intentional. Okay, it's when we intentionally draw on the languages of students in our classrooms to help them learn. So already, you know, we as teachers are already naturally translanguaging all the time, and so are our students. But pedagogical translanguaging is when we actually give it some thought and we actually open some spaces for it, right? So that we can leverage the practices of our students and their communities. And we can encourage them to do this, and we can create spaces for students' bilingualism and ways of knowing. So what isn't translanguaging? I want to clarify this right away because I always get teachers that get confused and feel like they already know it, but they may have heard a myth or they may misunderstand at least part of what it is. So what it isn't is teachers have to know all the languages their students know in order to do it. You can translanguage beautifully by even just telling your students to look up a word in the dictionary, right? Or in Google Translate. It's encouraging them to think through their languages. It doesn't mean you need to know all of their languages. Certainly it helps if you know the languages of your students. By no means it's helpful, but it doesn't mean you have to know all their languages. You can certainly do it without that. Also, it's not just translating everything into English, right? It's not just translating. Sometimes it can involve translating, but it's much, much more than that, okay? So I want to really get that point across today. And it doesn't mean we don't speak the target language. You can be speaking the target language the whole time and encouraging your students to think about their other languages and draw on their other languages and, you know, share their other languages, but it doesn't mean you don't have to give that target language input. I think that's the first thing that world language teachers worry about, and rightly so, right? We want to give them that input. We need to use the language, and translanguaging is not saying we can't do that, okay? What we normally do, though, is a lot of times we translate things into English, and today I'm going to get you to think about that in a different way. instead of centering the English dominant students in your classroom. And another thing I want to make sure we understand is translanguages is not when we don't value the non-standard ways of speaking, right? It's encouraging those students to talk, to share with you the way that they speak the language at home as well, and to value that, not say that it's wrong. It doesn't mean we can't teach the standard that is in our textbooks, but we also have to allow them to understand that that's also a valued way of speaking. So why is it good for language learners? Well, according to Garcia, translanguaging supports students as they engage with and comprehend complex content and texts. It provides the opportunities for students to develop language practices for academic texts. It makes space for their bilingualism and thus their ways of knowing and seeing the world. And it supports their bilingual and multilingual identities and social and emotional development. And so all of that really isn't possible to do unless you know your students in the first place. Because how can you encourage them to draw on their languages if you don't know that they speak or have studied other languages, right? So this includes languages they've studied but maybe don't feel proficient or fluent in. Those languages can also help them. You can see by my language portrait here, I've studied a lot of languages, but I'm not confident speaker in most of them, right? But still, they influence me. They help me learn other languages because I can draw on this way of thinking. So I got this language portrait from Dr. Sandra Rodriguez Arroyo. Woo-hoo. Love this woman. She is a teacher at UNO in the bilingual program, and she shared this with me. And I tried it with my students in my bilingual foundations course this semester. And it was so eye-opening because what you have the students do is they fill out this body and they color all the languages that they know, even if they know them just a little bit. And then they talk about why they labeled them that way. So you can see I put Korean on the ears because I went to Korea and I studied Korean for 2 weeks. And I watch a lot of K dramas and I feel that I can, understand some things, but I'm not at the level that it's, of some of the other languages I know. So, for example, I put Spanish on my arms and legs because I use it a lot in my work and in with my friends and my family. And Italian I put on my stomach because obviously it influences the food that I eat. And English I put in my head and on my face because uh, English is a language that I use a lot in my job, right? So when I did this with my students, it was incredible because I learned about other languages I had no idea that they spoke or that their family spoke, some indigenous languages, all of that. So you don't know that stuff until you ask students. And it's a great idea on the first day of class, before you move to talking in the target language and all of that, to just get to know them. Another possibility is this language and culture profile. This also was eye-opening to me because I got to learn a lot about their cultural background. So, they rate how they feel strongly in the languages they know. They talk about their family background, but also like they list the cultural groups they belong to. And it asks them to describe a time you felt proud to be a member of this group and describe a time it felt challenging to be a member of this group. I'm telling you, I learned information that I never had learned in other classes because of these. So whatever you use, just figure out some way to get to know the language and culture of your students, because then you can really capitalize on that in translanguaging in your classroom. All right, so now I'm going to move to giving some examples. And I'm going to start with world language, and then I'm going to move to a couple other types of language situations too, because I know that a lot of times world language teachers like me, I work in world language, but also dual language and also English as a second language. And I've also taught English as a foreign language. So it's good to think about, I want you all to understand that you can't just take translanguaging and plop, do it the same way in every context. Every context requires a different way of thinking about it, okay? Because you have very different students. So I'm going to try to impress that on you today. My first example is from Italian and Spanish. And I want to ask the question, are we limiting our translanguaging to English? So I used to teach Italian at the University of Arizona a couple of years ago, and I used to have a lot of students that were Spanish speakers, and they, uh, would usually catch on very quickly and were able to speak quite quickly because the languages are very similar. But sometimes with the grammar, I would see them make mistakes that I thought was odd because the structure worked the same way in Spanish. So, for example, in Italian, the expression mi piace means I like, and it's the same as me gusta in Spanish, right? However, I had students that would say mi piaccio, which is the yo ending, right? It's the first person ending instead of the third person ending. Because really the translation is it's pleasing to me, right? And that's why you say it with the third person ending. And so I would say to my students that spoke Spanish, hey, come si dice mi piace in spagnolo? How do you say that in Spanish? And they said, oh, it's me gusta. And I said, yeah, right? You don't say me gusto. So why are you saying mi piaccio? Right? And they would be like, oh, I get it. It's mi piace. And something would click and they would never make that mistake again. And so what I'm saying is, we have students in there that have languages other than English. So why do we always, refer to only English when we want them to make a comparison, right? Think about those students in your classes that have other languages. Something might click for them if that structure is similar to their own structure. All right. So another example is from my daughter's tutor. This is Montserrat Fuente Camacho. She was a teacher here at UNL for a while, and she tutored my daughter in Spanish. And she would always say, ¿cómo se dice whatever in Italiano? Because she knew my daughter knew Italian. And sometimes I was surprised because my daughter didn't always know the answer in Italian when I thought maybe she did. And sometimes I didn't know the answer. But every time she would ask this, it was amazing because, oops, went too far. It resulted in all three of us learning the expression in all three languages. So the tutor, learned the word in Italian, and my daughter and I would learn to the equivalents, and it helped us remember the word in Spanish, right? So it was really helpful because she was getting us to think about all the languages that we knew. Okay, so I just want you to think about your own teaching. Yeah, thank you, Nick. It's leveraging home languages, exactly. Um, so I want you to think about your own languages. When you're teaching, are you privileging English and English speakers in world language classroom? And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, most of my students are only English speakers. And that could be true, but it seems to me when I talk to my teachers more and more, there are so many other students that are coming into the classrooms with other backgrounds. Maybe they are English speakers, but they have other languages they're speaking at home or that they know or they study. So are you putting English instructions in English for your students? If you are, that's privileging those speakers instead of all the speakers, right? So maybe you could put instructions in all of the students' L1s or all of the students' home languages, or you can use images or visuals instead of that, right? Using the target language is always a great way to not privilege only those that speak English, right? Everybody's going to be on the same, leveling the field if you are using the target language, right? And finding other ways to make meaning. So I want to also say that multimodality is also a great way to translanguage in the sense that you're using things other than just English to translate something. This is an example from my doctoral student, and I really highly recommend you read if you're really interested in translanguaging a world language. This is what her entire dissertation is about. Although she did study the university context, but she showed how teachers in Japanese class, oops, sorry, got Chinese as well, help students understand the meaning of kanji by showing these pictures, right? And using the hands as well. And same thing for Chinese teachers. And in fact, many of the Chinese and the Japanese teachers that she observed had students that were Chinese speakers or Japanese speakers in their classrooms, many times because they thought it would be easier. They thought, the similarities of the writing script would help them. And so the teachers knew this, and some of them knew, how to bridge those characters and the meanings for their students. And so they would do things like this with their students. and then also tried to draw on the other languages the students knew. So just to give you an example of if you have a classroom, an English as a second language classroom, there are totally different ways that this could happen. You might have 15 languages present in your classroom, or you might have 10 speakers of one language in your classroom. So often what my students did in this article is they would tell the students, okay, work in groups, and you can look up, we're going to study the planets today, and I want you to look up the planets in whatever language you want. And then in your group, help each other figure out how we're going to present what you learned in English. And my student was the English teacher there, he said that his student told him, I didn't know this planet had so many moons. And that the students achieved higher levels of English in the process because they had to translate complex concepts from their home languages that they were able to understand more deeply in English. All right, everybody, I need to take a second. Another one of my doctoral students, this is the great thing about my job, is that I have doctoral students studying this all over the world, and they come back and they teach me things that I can bring back to you. In Hani Traore Maundipa's dissertation, she studied English learners in Burkina Faso, and they were also going to school in a French medium school, right? But they were used to everything just being given to them in French. Or when they went to English class, everything was in English. So she had them use their local languages to make sense of the English readings. And she found that they were so happy to be able to bring their local languages to school, and they found it so meaningful, and it really helped them understand the content better. And I want to give one more example from my doctoral student, Uma Ganesan, who graduated last year. She studied, as part of her dissertation, she studied the incorporation of indigenous languages like the Omaha language. I'm sorry that the writing did not come out right. There's supposed to be a little subscript on there. Anyway, she studied the incorporation of the Omaha language into science projects. And there were examples about how the students would work together with the teacher to come up with words in their language for modern concepts like breakfast cereal. You know, she used translanguaging by getting the students to think about the logical ways that their ancestors had coined specific words and integrated that into the content as well. So I'm just trying to show you all there are lots of different contexts in which we can use translanguaging. And I hope that today you've got some ideas for your own world language classroom as well. The final one I wanted to talk about is heritage speakers. We're talking about Spanish for Spanish speakers classrooms or Arabic for Arabic speakers we now have in Lincoln. This is also from Alessia Barbici Wagner's dissertation. She studied how the teacher would first figure out, you know, what are all the varieties of Spanish spoken in my classroom, right? She had them do a map and to figure out, okay, she had this many students, 75% were Mexican, 8% from Guatemala, 13% from El Salvador, 4% were Colombian. So she had this idea of all the different varieties that were spoken in her class. And then she used that knowledge of her students to call on them and say things like, okay, how do you say this word, you know, that we just learned today? How do you say that in Guatemala? How do you say that in El Salvador? And there's so many different ways. And the same thing here I've got with the map of Arabic, you know, very, very different ways of saying things. So instead of, you know, telling them, no, we have to learn the word pavo, right? Because pavo is the word for turkey in our textbook, and I don't want you to fail. We teach the word pavo, but then we say, what other ways do you know to say pavo? And then all the students learn these other varieties, and it's fantastic because they can communicate with so many more people across the world because of it. And here's just one more activity I want to show you that is getting students to think about the way that they speak the language in the United States, right? So we have Spanish as it's spoken in Mexico or in other countries, but then we have Spanish as it's spoken in the US, which we call Spanglish, right? And I think this would be a cool activity to do for Chinese speakers too, for anybody that has, you know, a diaspora of, you know, immigrant communities in the United States, where you take the word. So let's say I have the English word fence, And then I look at the word that is the loan word, the word that is in Spanish, in Spanglish, which would be fensa. And I say, okay, what's the word in Spanish that you know for that word? Does anybody in the audience want to put that in the chat? Any guesses? So we've got the word in Spanglish, we've got the word in English, but what's the word, the standard word that we usually teach the students in class? I'm just waiting for any of my Spanish teachers here. Yes, I got an answer. Cerca, yes, that's the one that I know, but there's another word too. Somebody always says, I don't know if anyone else knows it, but there's another one too. What do you think about high school? We've got high school, and then in Spanish, you might call it prepa or la escuela secundaria, or there might be other words. What would the word be in Spanglish? Any ideas? Okay, so you get the idea. I'm going to now move to the answers on the next slide. But the idea is to just get them really thinking about where the words come from. So, for example, high school spelled like that, but spoken just like in English, right? Or you might have the word congelar, which in the Spanglish would be frizar. What would that word be in English? Anybody can just shout it out. We're such a small group. Yeah, freeze, exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm just going to throw on some of these others on here for you. And those of you that don't speak Spanish, no worries. What I'm trying to do is just show you how this gets your students really thinking about the different ways that we speak a language when we live in a different country, right? And then also for the Spanish speakers I have on the call today, are there any of those that you didn't know that you were surprised by? Go ahead and put it in the chat or just shout it out. I was surprised about cash because I didn't know that they just used the English word for that. Efectivo, I knew that word, but I did not know they said cash. And another one I was surprised by was hanguear, to hang out. I thought that one was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, andar I thought was to wander rather than just to hang out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So the idea, these kind of activities get our students really thinking about seeing the way that they speak at home as a legitimate way to speak, right? It's not bad. It's actually, you need this to get by in the United States. And in fact, there, if you look at channels like Univision, Telemundo, this is the variety of Spanish that's on there, right? They're moving back and forth and using all kinds of words that are influenced by English. So it's a valid way of speaking, and you need to validate that for your students. And these kinds of activities really help them do that. So now I just want to show you an example of how translanguaging can be used in the arts merely by just encouraging students to move across their languages in creative endeavors. So this is an example of a slam poetry contest where students are using translanguaging. And I'm just going to warn you, we won't watch too much of this, but every single time I watch this, I cry. So just if you see me tearing up, that's why.
At the end of the day, when there is no work left to do,
when exhaustion is all that our legs can feel, we all want to get home.
but where do we go when home tells us to leave?
My grandma once told me, nunca olvides cuál es tu verdadera casa.
Never forget where your true home is.
Grandma, I'm not in the place that saw me grow,
But I will never dust my country's dirt off my shoulders.
She always reminds me where I come from. I come from trajes típicos, from frijoles y tortillas hechas a mano,
From brown skin and thick accents.
I tell grandma I'm not welcome in my new home.
Refugees!
When mi gente finds a way to keep their families stable, they label us
Dirty immigrants!
We did not want to leave, we did not want to run.
Asylum seekers!
But the alternative is watching your 3-year-old neighbor selling chicles next to El Mercado Negro. I
all you got? They blame us for taking away jobs that no one wants, for risking our lives to make theirs more convenient.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. But I think you get the idea. How they made the meaning is pretty clear, even though they still were using Spanish in there at times, right? It was woven in a way that anybody could still understand it. But at the same time, it got to a deeper meaning and an
At the end
emotional
of the
reaction
day,
from those that spoke Spanish, and especially from the performers themselves. So today, I'm just going to have you try that yourselves using haiku. As you probably know, haiku is where it's a type of Japanese poem where we have 3 lines. The first line has 5 syllables, second has 7 syllables, and the third line has 5 syllables, right? So I'll give you an example. Ave que muere, okay, bird, dying bird, de cenizas renace, 7 syllables. From ashes is reborn. Llega el amor. So, llega el amor. Yeah, that's 5 syllables. I had a doubt for a second. So, comes love, from which comes love. That's by Gerardo Diaz Infante. And now I'm going to give you an example. I made a silly haiku because a couple months ago I had to give a presentation in Mexico and work with Mexican teachers. And I was actually in Mexico through Zoom, right? But I was here. And I wanted to show them how you can use your languages in poetry. So here's also the World Cup was happening at the time. So that's why you see the soccer team. I think Mexico was actually playing that same day that I had to give a presentation. So I said, in Mexico hoy, moving across languages, piccolo mondo. So small world. And that was my in Mexico today, moving across languages, small world. And I incorporated my main languages that I speak into the poem. Okay. So now what I want you to do is to make your own haiku using your languages that you know. And it can be about anything you want. It can be about something you're learning today. It can be anything you feel like. And just type your haiku.
What are the rules for a haiku there, Teresa?
Yes, let me go
Remind
back
us.
to that. Yes, thank you for saying that. Yeah, so just the 3 lines, and the first has 5 syllables, second has 7, and then the third has 5. So you have to count to get the syllables right. So you feel free to just take about 5-10 minutes, and when you're done, put your haiku in chat, and we will have you share. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to just put a timer on for us so everybody knows. I think somebody is not muted. I can hear big bangs. Hopefully that's not me. About 5 more minutes. Hopefully that's enough time. And then feel free, if you've finished already, to just drop your haiku into chat for us, if you can. And once I see a bunch of them in there, I'll know we're ready. I see we've got one fantastic example already in there. Thank you, Nick. About 2 more minutes. And hopefully a few more people will put theirs in. And then we'll be ready to share. Bless you, Nick. I couldn't hear you, but I could see you. Right, 1 minute. Can I get a few more people to put their poems in? Well, I see a couple more in there. All right, 10 seconds. Anybody else? Going. All right. Let's start with Nick. Would you mind sharing yours? And then we'll just kind of go down the
We're not explaining, we're just sharing, right? Is that what you're saying?
just well, you can read it and then you can explain it afterwards if you want to tell us what it means, since we don't all know. Yeah.
Mi familia, USA, Nippon, Deutschland. Together we love. In my family, my wife is Japanese and we met in Germany. And we have 3 beautiful kids and together we love.
Love that. And the mi familia, because you also teach Spanish, right? Yes. Excellent. All right. Elsa, do you want to read yours?
Yes, mine is conocerme, sí. Let me see. Conocerme, sí, como yo te conozco, vale la pena. To know me, yes, like I know you, it is worth it.
I love that. I love that. The only thing I would say is if I were translanguaging, I would maybe change one of those lines.
Yeah, that's what I thought after I wrote it.
Okay, but thank you for sharing that. That's really pretty. How about Jim? I see you put a longer one down later. So yeah.
Yes, I hit the return button and it entered instead of taking me to a new line. So yes, my next one, my longer one, wouldn't make lines. So jak se máš, grupo? I am very well today. Hablemos pronto.
All right,
So the
tell us
first line I
what
put,
that means. Yeah.
all right, but the first line was in Czech and Spanish because I didn't know how to say group
Cool.
in Czech. So jak se máš, how are you all, group? I am very well today. Let's talk soon.
I love that. I did not know you spoke Czech as well. So see, you learn all these things. That's so cool. How about Jorge? Jorge, are you with us? We can't hear you. Maybe you need to be unmuted. Unmute.
Press that unmute button for us there, Jorge. Mic does not work. Okay, no worries.
Shoot. Okay. Well, if you want, I can read it for you.
Please do.
Okay. How to know lo que nos pasa son le temps laissé. Laissé. I don't know if I butchered that in French, I assume, right? So how to know what's happening with us, only time will tell, or only time knows. Am I correct? That's very cool. So he knows French as well as Spanish. Awesome. Sorry, your mic didn't work. No one else want to share? Oh, we got somebody.
See, Han entered one.
Yes, I cannot see it.
Yeah, I can read mine. I wrote learning from the past, une histoire qu'on a apprise, hope for the future.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed that.
No worries.
Oh, there it is. Yes. Yeah, great.
Learning from the past, a story one had learned, hope for the future.
Why did you think of that? What did you have in mind?
I was just thinking, mostly because I'm a first year teacher, and so the whole reason why I'm taking so many PDs is just to learn stories of everyone else's experience. So I was thinking learning from everyone else's past, a story that they've already learned, and so in my way, it's hoping for the future.
It's awesome. I love that you thought of that. Well, that was really cool. Well, I just want to take a second before we go into the final part of the chat, or do we have someone else with something in there? No. Okay. I I just want to take a moment to have you reflect on this. How did you feel using your languages in the poem? Like what did you observe about others when they got to read in their own language to the group? So let's answer those two questions first. Does anyone want to just go ahead and talk or put it in chat? You can, if you want, you can raise your hand and I'll just tell you to talk.
I'll start. I thought that was a wonderful activity. I think that by asking us to use our home languages, it really gave us a glimpse into each other a bit at a deeper level. I also appreciated being able to share out and share the meaning as well.
Awesome. What about anybody else? What did you notice about people when they read in their own languages? Because when I have seen people do this, sometimes I see this expression of happiness or smile or that I don't notice in other ways, but when they get to use their own language, it's just this joy, especially people who's, have gone through colonizing situations or aren't used to situations where people actually care about their home language or even know that it exists. Anyone else want to share about that?
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way about that. I mean, I could hear that in their voice that they took pride in knowing several languages that could relate to several languages. I don't know a lot of Czech, but it's something I learned from my superintendent years ago. Jak se máš? He'd say that down the hallway, and I like to use that once in a while. Um, and being able to use your languages in the poem, yeah, it's the languages are something unique about yourself. Because in Nebraska, middle Nebraska, where I'm at, most of the people know one language. Most of my students know one language, and it's it's not really unique just to have that one language, but I'm getting more students from other countries, and it's great to see them using some of their own vocabulary.
You so much. That's fantastic. So I want you to all be thinking about, can you imagine doing something like this in your own classes? It could be a video they make with them singing in their languages and the target language. And when they do this, what does it reveal to you about their identities? Like just today, I've already learned several things about some of you in the audience that I would have never known had you not done these poems. So I want you to think about that. And then I thought it might be fun, since there are only 9 of us, we can just go into 3 breakout rooms. We've just got about 10 minutes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Jorge has put something in and I just want to make sure to read that. He says, the phrase, every head is a world, expressing in different languages is a more cognitive expression, as we know that behind each language there are experiences, cultures, traditions, human stories, and this gives the opportunity to express ourselves better, more in a poem that expresses our thought. Really well said, Jorge. Thank you so much. I love that. All right, so now I'm going to just break us into 3 groups, and I'm going to give you just about 7 minutes to brainstorm with the other people in your group. How might you use translanguaging in your class? Think about what I did today and then think about how you might adapt it to your own setting. But also think about the speakers in your classes whose first language is not English, or maybe they speak a home variety of the language you're teaching that's different, okay? All right, so
I've got the breakout rooms ready, and so I'm going to press create. You will be invited. It's possible you must click the button to join. So I'm going to open them now, and please join. Thank you. Jorge is in one, Teresa is in one. Very good. Jim is in another. And muy bien. Great.
Are we the only ones back? I hope I'm in the right place. Hmm. Okay. Right. Welcome back, everybody.
Hi, sorry I was I was offline just now. Just
No
joined.
problem. No problem. I I just have a couple minutes before I have to go. I actually have to teach a class tonight. So I just want to end it with any questions or comments or anything you want me to know before you leave tonight. And I also have this wonderful thank you slide for everybody. I'm really appreciative that you came, and especially all of you are teaching, and you have such a long day, but you took the time to come. I think you all are the best teachers because you still take advantage of learning opportunities. I really appreciate that. So any questions, feel free to put in the chat, or if you just want to make a comment about you want to share something from your discussion, that would be great as well. Looks like Nick's having some problems, so I will take care of closing the meeting, no problem. Anyone else? Any comments or questions? No.
Back. I just want to
You're
say
back.
thank you very much, Teresa, for joining us for this NDE SLTA many acronyms guest speakers series. It was wonderful to meet folks from outside of Nebraska here as well today. Hope to see some folks at Central States Conference. Big round of applause. Thank you so much to Teresa for joining us. We hope to see you again at our next guest speaker series event.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Nick. You were a wonderful host. You did a great job. We appreciate it.